Hello and welcome to the October 2024 Industry Analyst Briefing by myself, Phil Clark. I work for a company called Embedded IT, and we work very closely with TD SYNNEX and Microsoft to really bring you the highlights of what's going on in Microsoft's ecosystem over the course of a 3 or 4 month period, to try and sort of highlight to partners where they should be focusing their attentions and making sure we're driving the industry forward in that context. The last update we did was in June 24. So this is a follow-on to that one. And since that point, we've had Microsoft's financial results and a few other pieces of news that we'll focus on. To last about 35 minutes, so hopefully this will give you useful insights into what's going on in Microsoft's world. In terms of the way this is structured, it tends to be focused on really what's going on in Microsoft, specifically around some of the big ticket items. So we focus on corporate strategy announcements like financial results and any acquisitions we've spotted. Also, any key product announcements or changes in the way products are being structured, some things around channel incentives, and some of the industry views on Microsoft overall. We've also included in this one a view on what's going on in the industry as a whole, largely because the industry's in quite a lot of turmoil. And so we just want to make sure that we've got gives you a bit of positioning on how Microsoft are performing in the context of some of its key verticals. In terms of sort of disclaimers, we are an independent company. We are not trying to sell anything here. This is really all about trying to make sure that you understand what's going on in Microsoft's world, and we'll give you an honest view on that. And in that basis, this is the view of Embedded IT Limited, and not any sort of views with regards to Microsoft or TD SYNNEX. And similarly, we're only going to give you the key headlines. There might be some things we've skipped over, primarily because we didn't feel they were overly relevant. So hopefully that will be useful to allow you to sort from the noise of the Microsoft channel and some of the other broader tech news as well. The PowerPoint will include links. So all of the stories we make reference to have links. So if you are wanting more information on anything we mention, please request from the TD SYNNEX team a copy of the PowerPoint, and they will send you through the PowerPoint in PDF so you can click through to whatever news items we're talking about. Now, the big news in the last 4 months was really Microsoft's financial results. They announced in July, at the end of July this year, their FY24 results summary. And as ever, an absolute stellar performance. Their revenue went up by about 16% to about $245 billion. Operating income up 24%, net income up 22%, all round consistent performance of growth. And that's not uncommon in Microsoft's financial announcements. Pretty much every quarter we've been reporting these for the last number of years. There have been an increase in revenue and net income, and it's really a reflection of a successful strategy set out probably about a decade ago to move towards cloud and cloud growth, and drive the product sets and the marketing all around delivery of good successful clouds. And obviously, two of Microsoft's primary cloud targets are Microsoft 365 and Azure. And in terms of breakdown of the way these results have been published, this is the Q4 results. They have increased pretty much on every line item within their product set. So in Q4 terms, to do a year-on-year comparison, basically Microsoft have increased their commercial bookings, so at the orders that they've got, by about 19%. Now it's a little bit down on some previous quarters, but fundamentally still good news, a 19% or between 17 and 19% increase. They've got a backlog of $270 billion, which has grown significantly by about $40 billion over the last 12 months. So they are in a business that have got plenty of contractual obligation in place, and so no issues with financial stability with regards to Microsoft. Their annuity mix in commercial space is 97%, and that's fundamentally different to where they were probably a decade ago, moving exactly, as we said, from license sales to cloud sales. And on that basis, it gives them a really successful, confident basis on which to invest in future platforms and future technologies, which clearly from an investment perspective is a really good position to be in, especially in the context of changing climates. Microsoft Cloud revenue, which is a combination of Azure and Microsoft 365, grew overall by about 22%. Again, high margin item, so doing really, really well. Azure revenue specifically was up 29%, and we'll talk about this in a little bit more depth later on. It compares to some of the other platforms such as GCP and Amazon Web Services, and they're broadly in line with sort of growth of all of those platforms. But Azure specifically seems to be doing very well, albeit the market positioning is sort of flattening out a little bit between Microsoft and Azure, and we'll cover that off in a minute. And also some of the other sort of lesser known or lesser publicized items are also in growth. So the more personal computing brand, which has had a bit of a turbulent time over the last few years, is up sort of 15 or 14 or 15% over the last quarter, sort of year on year for this quarter. So fundamentally, everything's in growth. And again, just a testament to a really good piece of strategy setting by Microsoft to support exactly what they're trying to do in terms of driving cloud and maintaining their revenues across the patch. This diagram sort of shows really what the split of the Q4 income was, or the revenue and profit. And it was a really good graphic, I think, but it just shows that the reliance that Microsoft now got on Azure and Office 365 and Microsoft 365 related products. But if you follow the sort of left-hand side of the chart, the Azure platform is about $26 billion and Office is about $14 billion. And that from a total of $64 billion in the fourth quarter shows it's about 40%, sorry, 60% of the revenues. And on that basis, they're going to continue to invest in Office and Azure and make sure that those products continue to be successful. The rest of the product portfolio, covering Windows, Xbox, etc., all still good businesses in their own right, but clearly not quite as robust or as significant as Office 365 or Server in that context. And so, it shows how that flows through as a product breakdown into quarter four's revenues of $64 billion. And you can see through this on the right-hand side of the chart, the other sort of interesting thing that comes out of this is that they've invested something like 12% of their revenues in R&D. So they continue to be investing in all of the product ranges, but probably very focused on Office 365 and Azure, Microsoft 365 and Azure, sorry. So it just shows as a company, they're doing all the right things to drive growth and innovation around the platforms that are the primary areas of their revenue streams. And they're not just backing off and letting their products stagnate or anything like that. And I suppose in today's market and today's technology climate, it's very difficult to maintain your market dominance. And Microsoft seems to be doing an incredibly good job of that, largely driven because they're very active in research and development and making sure they've got their products constantly updated, which actually makes my job very difficult, but that's sort of good news for people in the channel. A little bit about the sort of breakdown of the three main business groups they've got. So the first one is productivity, and that is their Office 365, Microsoft 365 related product sets. And as you can see here, in terms of fourth quarter FY24, they've got good growth over the piece. They've had a significant increase in the Microsoft 365 consumer subscribers. So this is people not in commercial world. And so they've gone up by 7.5 million just from a consumer perspective, which is really impressive considering that's primarily domestic users. In the commercial space, they've grown by about 13% in revenue terms from Microsoft 365 and sort of commercial related products. And their seat growth is about 7%. So that's an interesting dynamic in its own right. If the number of seats has only gone up 7%, but their revenues have grown 13%, they're getting more revenue per customer, if you like, per seat. And therefore, it shows that their people are taking on more and more products from the Microsoft 365 portfolio. So really good news for increasing the footprint and therefore the stickiness of commercial customers in Microsoft's terms. Other sort of lesser publicized products such as Dynamics are still growing. So Dynamics is up by 16%, LinkedIn up by about 10%. So all round a really good result. I think the interesting thing about the sort of timing of where we are, there's a note to say that the operating income wasn't quite as robust as it's not tracking the revenue, and that's largely because I believe Microsoft are making significant investments in products such as Copilot, but they're not quite seeing all the revenues just yet. So I can imagine over the next sort of 12 to 18 months, operating income will start going up because those investments will be effectively depreciated, and therefore the revenue that comes from Copilot and higher end licenses such as that will start flowing through to the bottom line. So, one to watch, just shows that even when they're making investments, they're still going to make good money. And so it's a good business model to continue to make investments in these products. Intelligent Cloud, which is primarily focused around Azure, has grown by 22% on a revenue basis. And that's a combination of Azure and other sort of server-related products. Not much to say, really. I mean, it's just a really good result all round. There is a strong driver for Azure also, the blend of on and off-prem through hybrid cloud. And so Microsoft have got a really good portfolio in this space. I think in reality, they will continue to grow aggressively in this space as things like AI and other sort of related products are brought into the portfolio. They've clearly made some significant investments in Azure and OpenAI into relationships, and so hopefully, again, same point as we made on the previous slide, the investments they've made in AI and other sort of Azure related platforms, have been made already, so the costs have been borne, but not necessarily that the revenues have flown through. So it'll be a good news story going forward as we continue to see improved revenue and therefore improved margins from investments made in AI infrastructure, etc. And then the sort of more personal computing brand, again, all rounds growth. The only sort of slightly negative, I suppose, point is a reduction in the revenue growth on devices. They have actually shrunk by about 11% year on year. And that's largely because they're not that fussed about, advertising or driving growth in that space. This is the Surface brand, but this has been a conscious decision by Microsoft to, move out of the hardware space and focus more on the cloud and the software space. So, in reality, I think that will continue to decline over time. There's also some market context. Devices have been very turbulent over the last few years since COVID. And so I can imagine, people are starting to refresh their devices, but maybe they're not choosing to use Surface, maybe they're going to other brands. So, interesting times to be in the sort of Surface business of Microsoft. Beyond that, good growth overall. You'll notice the Xbox revenue line item has gone up by 61%. Again, this is a significant increase year over year from FY23 Q4, but that's largely driven by the Activision purchase that they made a couple of years now, but went through in early on this year. So, significant growth on Xbox, but largely because the revenues from the Activision Blizzard merger has gone through, and so those are from a comparables perspective, that's what's skewing that number slightly. But again, good robust business, all round revenue up about 14% overall, and continues to be profitable, albeit slightly more complex with regards to the hardware device lines. Just sort of general strategy on Microsoft. I think there's a couple of things that are really starting to play out here. One is, clearly there is significant growth on cloud and AI, but that's going to come with probably more difficult cost bases. There's two main things really to focus on. One is data centers are going to get more and more expensive. Obviously, people are now, because of the increase in AI and other consumption of cloud models, getting hold of data center space and associated costs such as power is actually going to get more expensive. So Microsoft need to position themselves to have sufficient data center capacity to support the growth of their business, which is clearly substantial, but also with the increasing pressure on sustainability, they need to find ways of finding data centers with low CO2 emissions. So you'll notice at the bottom of this chart, there have been some recent announcements. Actually, the investment announcement they made on the bottom left here with regards to Egborough, it was actually made in February, but there is a lot of noise from Microsoft about how they're going to try and drive sustainability in the context of power usage and the getting access to power, etc., for their own data centers. So interesting times to maintain their cloud revenues. Clearly, to maintain those cloud revenues, they need to have capacity in terms of power and infrastructure to support that. The middle link that you'll see, or graphic you'll see at the bottom of this chart, relates to Microsoft agreeing to buy 500,000 tons of direct air capture carbon credit removals. So they're starting to invest in technologies that will improve sustainability and reduction in CO2 emissions, as well as buying their own data center spaces and their own sort of power provisions to ensure that they can drive forward. The other potential impact that they're going to have to consider in their future strategies are regulatory issues. Now, obviously, from an AI perspective, there are a lot of risks that come with using AI. Microsoft recognize this, and they are trying to get themselves in a position where they can control the narrative around regulation. So, they've specifically requested, and again, the links in the middle of this chart, that Congress try and get to a position where they regulate for deep fake fraud as a result of AI. There's a lot of potential misinformation going around, especially in the context of the American election. And Microsoft are actually lobbying the government in the US to drive an improved posture on deep fakes and other AI related sort of ethical problems. So they're going to have to invest as a result of that sort of action in making sure they've got the right regulatory frameworks in place for their AI tools, and that will come at a cost. So strategically, lots of growth in the cloud platforms and AI platforms, but clearly they're going to get more and more expensive and more complicated as regulation comes in and power and space in data center forms becomes more difficult to get hold of. But the good news in terms of strategy is that they're clearly driving towards adoption of AI with Copilot and those sorts of products. And another metric that came out, I think it was from the Microsoft sort of publications, was that 80% of SMB staff are actually using their own AI tools in the workplace. So that's a good thing. Obviously it supports Microsoft's objectives to drive Copilot and AI related tools into the workplace, but obviously comes at a risk which needs some thought in terms of how things are going from a security perspective and those sorts of things as well. But from our perspective, Microsoft's strategy is absolutely rock solid, and they will continue to be a great partner of the channel going forwards because they're making brilliant investments in loads of really good platforms, which hopefully will continue to grow, in conjunction with partners and channels in the UK. A little bit about what's going on, sort of more general announcements. You will notice if you follow Microsoft on any of their platforms that everything is all about Copilot and AI generally, but Copilot is their big push at the moment. They have made a sort of latest wave in Copilot, sort of related to Microsoft 365. So they've incorporated some quite interesting new features, which I think will start new conversations with customers. The three ones that we sort of pulled out from Microsoft Wave 2, so Copilot Wave 2, is Pages. Now, for those of you who use Copilot, the tool on your laptop, this is really allowing you to take a response from Copilot as the AI engine and put it in what they call a page, which allows you to share that page with some of your co-workers, and then hopefully they can then contribute in whatever their role is to building out a platform. So for instance, if you are looking to build a sales presentation, you could go off and ask Copilot to create some market analysis, put that in a page. If one of your other colleagues is creating marketing reference data and they ask Copilot to do the same sort of thing, you can collaborate in a Copilot page to support whatever the output of Copilot is and other things as well, and edit it in real time. Very much like the sort of the collaboration you can do in Microsoft Word at the moment, but really integrating Copilot output into that. So a really interesting sort of step forward, because clearly Copilot, you would think, can do a lot of automation across multiple different platforms. But what this is recognizing is individuals have different requirements and outputs in their roles from Copilot. And what this gives you is the ability to collaborate with your colleagues who've got slightly different focus or different remits with regards to using Copilot to furnish documents and PowerPoints and those sorts of things. They've also incorporated Python in Excel. And if you look at some of the content here, and again, the links on the page, it's quite an interesting use of sort of third-party coding language. Excel is pretty robust in terms of its ability to do analysis. But this shows, by using Copilot again, within Excel, you can upload a big data set and get Excel to do, or Copilot for Excel to do analysis of that. But what this also does is it shows you some of the Python code that Copilot uses or can generate to do further analysis of your data sets in Excel. And because Python is such a ubiquitous language, it actually gives you the option to amend the Python code and tweak it a little bit to drive different behaviors or different outputs based on what Copilot thinks you need and what you actually need. So, if you are a Python programmer and you have the ability to read Python and amend it to drive different outcomes to those that a Copilot are suggesting, it's actually quite a cool little feature. And again, I'd recommend, if you're into sort of big data analysis, and you want to use Excel for that, then it's definitely worth having a look at the demonstration video under this link, which is the second link down. And it gives you a really interesting example of how you can change graphical output by tweaking Python code rather than just typing in prompts to Copilot. So this general push with regards to Microsoft 365 Copilot, there's more functionality coming, and certainly this isn't the end of the road. There's going to be plenty more coming down the roadmap. So it's a watch this space thing, and I think people will continue to be, find use cases for driving adoption of Microsoft 365 Copilot in that context. Similar on the Azure front, they've actually announced a new set of tools and features in relation to the Azure OpenAI service. Now, obviously, Microsoft have got a massive partnership with OpenAI, and this is bringing in some of the more recent code sets from OpenAI, such as GPT-4o, just to make sure that those tools can be incorporated into your Azure platform features and functions. And there's a slide later on in this deck which shows that the perception in the industry is that most of the large language models will start becoming multimodal over time. And I think what we're doing with this product set or product announcement from Azure is driving multimodal adoption in the context of what you're using Azure for. So incorporate audio and speech capabilities into the Azure OpenAI services to drive the right behaviors and make sure there is examples of things that you can do there. And one final sort of relevant announcement, there's a big driver for Windows 365. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's a VDI-based platform in its simplest form. That is relevant to most customers who like a VDI-related experience. And there's been a discount in that Windows 365 price, subject to some terms and conditions, which is definitely worth talking to your TD SYNNEX partner manager about. But it's really to try and drive adoption of Windows 365 as an alternative to just a native PC experience. Windows 365, I think, it's been fairly successful over the last few years. It's evolving as a platform, and it's really probably primarily targeted at people who want to bring their own PC into the workplace, but need a work-specific environment in which to operate, separate to their actual native laptop. So it's quite an interesting proposition. And again, your TD SYNNEX partner manager can definitely help with driving out use cases for your customers, especially in the context of the fact there's a significant discount off the pricing to try and drive adoption of that platform. A couple other things on partner programs and commercials. The legacy benefits, which is really the interpretation of what used to be known as internal use rights, has changed a little bit. I think as part of the restructuring of the partner programs about 12 months ago, Microsoft changed your ability to gain access to internal use rights software. And so it got a bit more complicated to make sure you had the appropriate usage rights for internal use of Microsoft platforms, and some people lost out on that. What this sort of update is really saying is that you can now apply for what they call legacy benefits, but you can only apply until the 21st of January 2025. So if you are looking to continue internal use of Microsoft's products within your business, you need to make sure that you're on top of your applications for legacy benefits, which allows you to continue to a certain extent, some of the use of Microsoft products up until the end of 21st of Jan 25. And that I think you can renew for 12 months. So you can carry on using for another 12 months thereafter. If you do not renew this in time, then you will be automatically defaulted into the solution designations side of things, which means that you may or may not be able to drive the equivalents or things like benefits you get from the old platform. So definitely worth getting your head around that. And there's a link on this page that explains that probably better than I just did. And similarly, Microsoft have refreshed their commerce incentives. Now, this is a significantly complex area and very specific to what each partner is. So the Microsoft Commerce Incentives Program is really trying to make sure that you get the right incentives from all of your cloud spend with Microsoft. Definitely worth picking up the phone and having a chat with your partner manager at the appropriate time to understand what the impact is going to be on you, because there are a couple of different options that wouldn't be appropriate to cover off in a simplified presentation such as this. So if you are worried about anything to do with that Microsoft Commerce Incentives Program, please get in touch with TD SYNNEX and they'll explain that to you as best they can. A little bit about Microsoft share price and how it's comparing to some of its peers. Now, this is quite an interesting picture. We pulled these slides in the middle of October, and obviously the world has changed a little bit. I'm now recording this sort of early November, so Trump has just been re-elected, and as a result, the share the general market conditions have changed fairly fundamentally. But at the point at which we pulled the graphs, Microsoft, although they're having stellar results, weren't actually doing as well as some of its peers in the index. So, Apple, which is the green line over 3 months, they dropped about 1%. Amazon, which is the purple line, had dropped about 3%. Microsoft had actually dropped about 9% or 8%. And Google had dropped about 12%. So all around the tech market had dropped over a 3-month period. Slightly different story over 6 months, i.e. Apple had gone up significantly. And over 2 years, Microsoft had gone up significantly. So I think the sort of summary of this slide is there's a lot going on in the world of stock market from a tech perspective. And in reality, Microsoft continues to track its peers. It's largely driving the index, things like the Nasdaq, etc. So, nothing to fundamentally worry about in terms of Microsoft's performance against its peers. I think the most influential thing that's going on with Microsoft's share price, as well as Microsoft peers, is what's going on in the broader geopolitical landscape and macroeconomic landscape, which will affect all of these shares appropriately. There's nothing fundamentally that's causing any concern in the stock market with Microsoft as a company, or any of its peers by the looks of things here as well. And just the context of where we are in terms of cloud results for AWS and Google specifically, both have announced their sort of results on cloud over the last few months. AWS announced that their net sales specific to AWS, not across the Amazon whole business, went up by 19%, which is clearly a good result compared to Azure, which is around about sort of 20 or mid 20%. So, AWS continues to be a credible cloud provider, clearly, and also, on a bigger base, they've got bigger market share than Microsoft. A 19% increase is significant because clearly it's on a bigger number, so the percentages are healthy. Similarly, operating income significantly increased year over year. Is delivering about just under $9.3 billion. So that's about 74% year on year increase. So they are going gangbusters, as AWS tend to. And they're driving good sort of revenues and growth in that context. The one thing in our view that AWS probably haven't got that Microsoft have got a very good grip on is the partner ecosystem. And certainly, I think Microsoft's relationship with its channel partners is a lot healthier than maybe AWS's is, or certainly more broader. Sorry. And in that context, it'd be interesting to see how they compete with Microsoft as we go through market share and trying to compete for market share. Similarly, Google Cloud revenue, they announced their Q1 results. They are showing an increase year on year of 28%, which is clearly significant compared to some of its peers. But again, on a smaller base, their revenues are a bit less than, or about a third of Amazon's, and probably about half of Microsoft. So in that context, 28% growth is clearly very impressive. But when you look at the absolute numbers, it's a slightly different story. But both companies are basically saying, as part of their statements, that AI is the thing that's driving a lot of the adoption. It's really reinvigorated the cloud market. And also they're leveraging their partner programs to make sure they can drive and satisfy the demand that's in the market. So some interesting times. I think, again, Microsoft have got a good, strong story with regards to both AI and its channel. So hopefully, these three will continue to be the market leaders. And you'll see from this next chart, there is substantial growth in the cloud provider market. The top left-hand corner shows the relative position of Amazon, Microsoft, and Google. Microsoft tailed off a little bit compared to Amazon with regards to market share this quarter, but fundamentally, there's nothing to worry about there. We've got a little bet in the office that says that Microsoft will overtake Amazon in 2025. I'm not convinced that's right anymore, but it's still a good competitive market for the top three: Amazon, Microsoft, and Google. And fundamentally, across the world, it's quite interesting. The bottom right-hand side chart here shows the relative positions of the three different companies across the different geographies, and it's US, rest of APAC, Europe, and rest of the world is all Amazon, Microsoft, and Google top three, 1, 2, and 3. Obviously, China, slightly different market, very focused on Alibaba, Tencent, etc. So there's a lot of consistency in the market globally, with the exclusion of China. And so Amazon, Microsoft, and Google continue to be the main leaders in the cloud market, and I think they will be for a long time yet. And IDC, just a little bit of reassurance about where things are going from a cloud market perspective. IDC is now driving a doubling of the overall revenues between 24 and 28. So from a compound annual growth perspective, they're looking at increasing 19%, 20% year on year over the next 4 years. So again, continues to be a very good place for partners to get involved in, to try and get on the back of that growth from a market perspective as well. And sort of expanding on that a little bit, these are really, the left-hand side of this chart is really commenting on the infrastructure sourcing, or the infrastructure spend with regards to its deployment in various cloud platforms. So it shows here that at the bottom of the chart, the purple, in 2023, 35% of the spend on infrastructure, IT infrastructure, was used in non-cloud platforms or dedicated to a customer. 48.9%, which is the orange bar here, was used for either delivery of cloud platforms or shared. And by shared, they mean delivered across multiple customers. So this is service providers buying hardware that is used by multiple different clients of its. And then the yellow bar, which is 15.6% in 2023, that's used for cloud and dedicated. So this is combining cloud-based infrastructures with hardware that the customer will own and have dedicated to their own workloads. And you'll see as this sort of goes through 23 to 2028, the main sort of winner in this in terms of growth is service providers and comm service providers and those sorts of people buying infrastructure that is really focused on delivery of shared services across multiple customers. Cloud and dedicated will always be a thing because there'll be certain customers that need dedicated equipment, but fundamentally the non-cloud related spend and dedicated related spend, the purple bar is shrinking and being consumed by the orange, which is the use of shared infrastructure. So if you are a service provider listening to the podcast or the video, focusing on making your investments in shared infrastructure as opposed to dedicated infrastructure would probably be quite a good thing to focus on. On the right-hand side, again, further evidence. It just shows some of the growth rates of different categories within the cloud ecosystem. IaaS continuing to grow. Enterprise SaaS not growing as aggressively, which is interesting because I think most people are really evaluating that at the moment. Public cloud continues to be about 40% growth in half. This is first half 2024. And future pipeline of hyperscaler infrastructure has grown massively. So it just shows there's a real forward-looking view on what's going on with the cloud, over the whole market. A couple of other specific things. Cybersecurity, clearly in the complex world in which we live, where there is a lot of risks around, both cyber risks, digital risks generally. Gartner are now predicting a significant growth in cyber spend. I think they believe that in 2023 it was about 12% growth year on year, 24%, 13%, and 2025 will be a good year for cyber. Again, largely driven by the significant focus on digital and cyber threat over the course of, in the context of geopolitical risk generally. One of the other things that came out was there's a lot of noise that wasn't in previous video that we made related to CrowdStrike. I remember when this kicked off in sort of July time, and lots of people were asking the question whether it was a problem with Microsoft specifically. It wasn't. It was really in relation to CrowdStrike updating a patch or a piece of software that they had in their platform. And so, there is a belief that cost billions of dollars. Not big surprise considering the impact it had. But I think there's still a long way to go to really understand what the impact of that's going to be and how those revenues or those costs are going to be absorbed by various parts of the industry. AI continues to be the main focus of all industry analysts and all industry sort of news. Gen AI continues to be the sort of market leading flavor of AI. And I mentioned previously, multimodal AI is going to be sort of 40% of the Gen AI world. Now, multimodal, what that means is it's really looking at something a bit more complex than pure text. Large language models are largely based on text. And so in that context, they will be able to analyze fairly simple large language text, and that's a single mode form of AI. What multimodal AI is really taking that but blending it with other things such as image or sound or other sort of more complex data sources to give outputs associated with artificial intelligence. So Gartner are predicting that actually the future workloads can be a lot more complex than just large language models. So things like ChatGPT will continue to be a very powerful tool, but we'll need to probably embrace some of the more complex image analysis and those sorts of things as well. And obviously Microsoft have got a great story in this world already with regards to Copilot, but I think we'll see more and more AI related workloads looking at more complex tasks than just analyzing pieces of text or those sorts of things as well. The market in AI continues to be enormous growth. IDC believe that there's something like $20 trillion of global economic growth as a result of AI adoption through, up to 2020, which is mad if you think about it. And I think when everyone sort of started thinking, AI is going to change the world because it's going to lay loads of people off, clearly at an economic lens, the productivity is going to go up, and therefore the global economy will grow as a result of AI adoptions. What that means to people's jobs and how that all works is a different debate. And in that context, Gartner are looking that are predicting with regards to finance functions, that finance are really probably at the forefront of trying to understand how to automate some of the processes relating to their data analysis and those sorts of things. And this could be even as simple as deploying automatic invoice reading and classification, or it could get more complex like forecasting, etc. But fundamentally, by 2026, which is what, a year away, Gartner are predicting that 90% of a finance function in a business will have at least one AI-enabled technology, which is quite incredible, and actually start to question whether we've got the skills in the industry to support that level of adoption. More analysis, again, IDC forecasting something like 630 billion of AI-related spending in 2028, significant growth. Compound annual growth on AI spending is broadly around about the 40% mark. So even though we previously mentioned that the cloud adoption is around about the sort of 20%, 19, 20% compound annual growth, AI, if you want to grow your business, is where it needs to be. So 40% year-on-year growth, so 4% compound annual growth from 2023 to 2028 just shows that you really do need to be in AI if you want to grow your business. I think it's going to get a very busy place to be, and so you need to differentiate yourself appropriately. But the whole thing is going nuts, and it's just trying to stay on top of it is the big issue you've got. So as a channel partner, I really think it's worth picking up your battle, focusing on one thing, and trying to make sure that you can use that one thing to differentiate yourself in what's going to be a very noisy and a very sort of high growth market over the next few years. And if you start looking at things like the adoption curves and the hype cycles that Gartner predict, I mean, they're saying that a lot of the AI tools are already sort of reaching the plateau of productivity. For those of you who don't follow these graphs, it's quite an interesting view of how different technologies will go through its hype cycle, starting with the innovation trigger, which is like the start of its journey. Everyone gets excited about it, peak of inflated expectations. Then they realize it's not as good as they thought it was, trough of disillusionment, and then they're on the slope of enlightenment to plateau of productivity. It's showing that AI has been around for long enough now to start stabilizing and just becoming productive. And if you can look at this hype cycle, which is a specific one for digital workplace applications, there's lots of different technologies that are actually getting to a position where people are starting to realize they're not quite as great as they thought they were, such as workplace experience apps. But eventually, over time, they'll increase in their productivity. People just get used to what they're expecting, and then it will just become productive. So AI is well and truly here, and we are working through the impacts of that. And it will certainly be interesting to see how things go. And the other point is, that the Gartner predicting with regard to Gen AI projects, lots of customers are buying AI or playing with AI in terms of understanding how it's going to be adopted in their businesses. But Gartner's predicting 30% of the projects, probably 30% of the spend, will be abandoned after the proof of concept. So, over the next year or so, there should be quite a lot of spend in people dipping their toe in the water for Gen AI. But fundamentally, not all of those those projects are going to be successful. And so you need to probably pick and choose which customers you're working with to make sure you're on the back of the successful ones, and also make sure your commercials reflect you're being paid for the work you're doing, not taking a punt on whether you're going to actually do well on the phase 2 of the project. So worth from a commercial perspective, if you're a service provider or a builder of AI, make sure you've got your commercials in place to get paid for the work you do. A little bit about PCs and tablets. It's been an interesting time being in the sort of PC shipments market. Devices, as I said previously, since COVID has been quite a difficult market to be in. I think everyone during COVID in sort of 2020 dashed out and bought themselves a new PC. Most PCs are on a 3 or a 5 year refresh cycle. So in 2023, there was a bit of an increase in adoption and shipment of PC devices. But 2024 third quarter has seen a bit of a decline again, and I don't know whether that's just because people are starting to sweat their assets a bit more readily, or we're just in a place now where we're comparing year-on-year figures against 2023, which was quite a good year all round. So interesting times to be in PCs and tablets. I think in reality, it's a hardware-related sale. People will always need devices to access their computers or to access their services. But fundamentally, it's a difficult market to make money in, and certainly that's part of the reason why I think Microsoft have defocused away from their Surface platforms. But fundamentally, if you're in that space, people will always need them, but the growth isn't really it isn't comparable to AI and cloud related growth statistics. And one to sort of really focus on, I think this will become more and more relevant as we go through the industry news. Power is becoming more and more of an issue. Microsoft have made investments themselves in buying data center space and helping companies, power companies, uh, start generating based on old areas that used to generate power, such as 3 Mile Island. But I think all of the major providers, Oracle, AWS, Google, are looking to wade in and make sure they've got energy security for their cloud platforms going forward, because they're all predicting that getting access to energy and space in data centers is going to be difficult over the next 5 to 10 years. So, one to watch: if you are a provider, a service provider, and you've got your own data center, make sure you understand your energy provision and you've got appropriate protections in place to maintain security of supply. And similarly, if you are working with one of the hyperscalers, just make sure you understand that their investments are appropriate, and some of the uh, locations of cloud platforms that you've got has appropriate energy supply. Because I think next 5 to 10 years, people are going to start getting quite interested in new nuclear and renewable energy sources to ensure that they can get hold of energy if they need to maintain their businesses. Right now, if you think Microsoft's revenues are 60-70% underpinned by cloud platforms, if they can't continue the data centers because energy supply is difficult, then clearly their business is at risk. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out as an industry phenomenon. So overall, I think the general sense is the IT market is growing. Clearly, AI is driving a lot of the growth, but overall, the Gartner are saying at the moment in 2024, we think we'll have a 7%, 7.5% growth of all sectors within IT, largely driven by a combination of data centers and software. So again, that's sort of largely cloud and AI related spend. There's some other things going on, in the market overall, but I think it's going to continue to grow over the next sort of 5 years. And so it's a great place to be from a business perspective, and making sure you've got the right commercials in place to support that growth. And getting access to skills is another thing you're going to need to factor in in terms of business planning. And a couple of sort of specifics that again underpin some of those things. AI is going to continue to sort of dominate the news landscape. Salesforce, which obviously large provider in their own right, that's worth saying that they had a better user experience to Microsoft Copilot on one of their agent-based AI platforms that they launched out called Agentforce. Microsoft rolled out Copilot Studio to help people deliver their own agents. So there's going to be lots of competitive plays across all of the major cloud providers to support pouring in or securing customer spend based on user experience and based on quality of AI output. A couple of the other things that are probably going to need to be factored into sort of growth thoughts as well. Generally speaking, the UK and the EU are behind the US with regards to AI adoption. And generally speaking, Europe and the UK are more heavy on regulation than the US is from an AI adoption perspective. Now, some political argument, you could say whether it's good or bad to have regulation. Personally, I think at an ethical level, we do need to maintain some control over what goes on with AI. And so the European and the UK sort of stance on this has been to make sure that they understand how they're going to regulate AI usage, which slows down growth and adoption. The US is a little bit more free market, and therefore they are stealing the march a little bit with regards to AI adoption. And it makes it difficult for European and UK based businesses to compete. So I think it's one to watch. If you are looking to really go wade into AI holistically and you're less worried about the regulatory controls around that, then maybe sort of looking at US related businesses would be something that's worth looking at, either from an acquisition perspective or starting up a different delivery model, or just delivering your services from US based partners. So there's a whole raft of things. It's quite a complex area. There's a whole raft of things that are considerations that you just need to get your head around here. But similarly, in good news, the government and both the EU and the UK are making significant investments in UK IT industry. I think that will continue to be the case. Everyone spotted that this is a major growth area, No one wants to get left behind. So fundamentally, great place to be, but the UK and EU is a bit more complex to trade in because of the regulatory concerns. Couple of little plugs. So we are continuing to run our Microsoft Channel Discussions podcast. It's on Spotify. So if you are interested in working or sort of listening to different partners or different bits of Microsoft talking about what they're up to, please do tune in. It's myself or my colleague Tim Hearn tends to get involved in those. And I think the format of those is going to change over the next sort of 3 to 6 months. So do listen in, and hopefully we'll get more and more people in to talk about what's going on in their respective organisations. And then the sort of final point that we tend to make, just sort of more tongue-in-cheek thing, it's always interesting to sort of see how graphically you can show the size of the technology industry. And there's a number of companies that have flicked over into $1 trillion valuations recently, Tesla, etc. But fundamentally, if you look at the right-hand side of this chart, the blue companies are largely tech companies, and you'll see how dominant technology is in market economy at the moment. It's really interesting to see how technology is starting to take over the world. Well, it has been for a while. But in terms of valuations and where to invest your money, continues to be a great place to be. So as someone said, the geeks have the markets covered. And so as long as we continue to be geeks and we continue to drive the right behaviors with regards to technology adoption, then there's no reason to be fearful about whether the IT industry is a good place to work. And that is it. So that's our update, a little bit longer than I was expecting. But if you have got any questions about what's just been said, or you want to get access to the slides, please do get in touch with your TD SYNNEX UK CSP team on csp.uk@tdsynnex.co.uk. By all means, reach out to me, phil.clark@embedded-it.co.uk. Happy to discuss, and look forward to the next one, which is likely to be towards the back end of December, early January. Thank you.